Welcome to the Future of Workplace video series. My name is Neil Mackay and I'm your host today. Now, the Future of Workplace is a video content series that aims to feature companies that are pivoting early #back to office solutions. In this series, we interview leaders, managers about their thoughts around the hybrid movement and how their businesses adapt to these changes. We'll discuss productivity, collaboration, office optimization to give audiences valuable insights into seamlessly transitioning back to the office. So my guest today from Austin, Texas, FullStack Labs is CEO and co-founder of FullStack Labs, David Jackson. Thanks for joining us today.
Sure, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
How are things in Austin, Texas?
Austin, Texas is great. We moved here about 8 months ago and we just absolutely loved it. We left Northern California and came here and so far we're very happy with the move.
How's the barbecue there?
It's very good. There's lots of different options that we're still working on exploring, but so far we've been impressed.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been there before and I had a really good time. So tell me then, can you share a bit more information about yourself and FullStack Labs?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of FullStack Labs. We're a roughly 200-person company located in Austin, Texas. We offer nearshore and onshore software consulting services to clients, which means we help clients design and build new software applications. And we also provide staffing and team augmentation services to clients, where we will embed our software developers into clients' existing teams or build software development teams for clients. About 75% of our folks are in Latin America, distributed across Latin America, and then about 25% are in the United States. So we offer clients kind of a unique hybrid model of onshore and nearshore services.
Awesome. And how old is FullStack Labs?
We are getting to close out our 6th year in business. So we're about 5.5 years in. And we're a fully bootstrapped company owned by just Mike and myself. And we're at 200 people and growing at about 20 to 30 per month.
Wow, that's incredible. And so how did you create and start this company? What was your background before then?
My background is in sales and business development. So prior to FullStack, I worked for a company that built, and I was a junior partner at a company that built a marketplace for buying and selling semiconductor manufacturing equipment. And then prior to that, I was the first employee at Software Advice, which was a lead generation service for the software industry that eventually or recently was acquired by Gartner.
Awesome.
And then Mike, my co-founder, is he's our CTO. He runs the technical side of the business, and his background was in software development. He went to a boot camp in, I think it was like 2014, maybe in 2013, and started his software development career. And then we teamed up to start FullStack Labs.
Nice. So what has been your experience then previously with FullStack Labs, or even before, in terms of working remotely? You mentioned you have 75% of your team in Latin America, and I assume they spread across Latin America.
Yeah, well, so previous to FullStack Labs, I didn't have any experience working remotely. I think like a lot of people in the late 2000s, early teens, it wasn't a very common thing to do. I remember at some of my previous jobs, even working from home when you were sick was a little taboo. It was kind of like, well, you can do it, but you can really tell your manager wasn't super excited about the idea. And even though you're sick, you should probably still come into the office. Now, obviously, because of COVID and the remote work models, like the idea of that just seems completely crazy. But that was my previous experience. But when we started FullStack, we started FullStack in, I think it was 2015 or 2016. And initially, when we were just 5 or 10 people, we did have an office in Sacramento, and most of our people were in the office. We had a couple of remote developers, but at the time, I don't think we envisioned being a fully remote company at scale.
It is incredible how much the world has changed in terms of what you just said. I've had experience of exactly what you said there about, maybe I should work from home today. And it's like, oh, are you sure about that? And the thought now of saying to someone, oh, you should come in sick. I don't know, because I don't know what is happening right now in the world, but I imagine that most companies don't say that anymore. Is that right?
Yeah, I would not think any companies were encouraging sick employees to come into the office like they used to. So I'm glad that that trend has passed.
And it feels like that it took like a global pandemic just to see some common sense that if you're sick, you should probably stay home instead of coming in and infecting half the workforce.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously I think that is why it changed, but I think one of the reasons that it's changed is because it's possible to work from home now. And previously it really wasn't, back in 2008, 2009, when I first kind of started my career in the software industry, it was difficult to work from home. You had email, but that's not really a good, remote work tool. Other than that, there weren't good communication options. You didn't have Zoom, you didn't have Slack, you didn't have things like that. And so it was very difficult. It could be done, but it wasn't nearly as, seamless as it is today, where you could really be a fully productive and, employee working as part of a remote team.
It's very true. And I feel like because we've progressed so much with the technology, we almost take it for granted. When you say 2008, to me, that seems like it wasn't that long ago, but then you're actually like, what was the technology like in 2008? That was 13 years ago. Like the technology was completely different. What was available then, right?
Yeah, I mean, they had things like Slack, Skype for, video calling, but it didn't really work. And it was really used more for, at the consumer level. You didn't see it commonly used in businesses from what I recall.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to someone about this just recently. Do you remember when the pandemic hit? I don't know about you, but I'd never heard of Zoom before, and most of the world hadn't heard of it. And I remember when we first started using it, myself and other colleagues were so excited. We're like, have you heard of this thing called Zoom? You can do this, and it's got breakout rooms, and it's so cool. I feel that excitement wore off pretty quickly.
Yeah, we were using Zoom and working remotely. We started in late 2015, early 2016, and after the first year, we had started moving to partially remote. And so we had already been users of Zoom for a couple of years, and we're kind of well positioned for the pandemic. So it wasn't a new tool for us, but I think the amount that we used it certainly changed. And some people really don't like it. You hear a lot of people talking about Zoomers. I was in Wyoming recently, in a very remote part of Wyoming, and the waiter said that they had a Zoom boom in Jackson, Wyoming, which meant all of these tech workers from really expensive states around the country flocked to Jackson, Wyoming to work, and that created a Zoom boom, which created a housing boom and drove up prices and created all kind of problems for the local community to work through.
That's great. There's the new terms, new phrases I haven't heard before: Zoom boom and Zoomers. So that's like that. Yeah. We have the boomers, now we had Gen X, millennials, now we have the Zoomers generation.
Right, exactly.
I love it. So explain to me a little bit, pre-pandemic, what was your work situation in terms of work from home, remote? It seems like it was a bit of a mix at that point.
Yeah, so we had offices prior to the pandemic. We had an office, and we're headquartered in Sacramento, California. And I think we had about 15 or 20 people in the office there, and we were doing 3 days in the office, 2 days remote. I mean, at one point we were 5 days in the office, and then just to based on employee feedback, we started offering 2 days remote, and then for that office. And at that time, we had remote developers located across the United States and Latin America. We also had a small office in Washington, D.C., and then we had a large office in Barranquilla, Colombia, in Latin America, and then another office in Medellin, Colombia. And so I would say prior to COVID, roughly half of our team was working in the office part-time, and then half our team was working fully remote full-time.
So you were already kind of quite familiar with that situation. So, but did it still come as a massive shock then when COVID hit?
I mean, COVID was a massive shock to everyone, obviously. We were very uncertain there for a month, 4 to 6 weeks. Everybody was like, what is going to happen here? What is the outcome going to be? And it just created a lot of uncertainty in terms of the future. And, we took some steps that in hindsight really benefited us. I had been through the tech wreck and then through the financial crisis. So I kind of had two of these economic explosions under my belt. And the companies that I had worked for previously during those times had invested heavily in sales and marketing as a response to those crises. And we did the same. So when COVID hit, we looked at our expenses very carefully. And we made some cuts in certain parts of the business, but then we invested in sales and marketing very heavily. We built out a sales team. We hired a marketing manager, and we decided if we're going to get through this, then we're going to have to make these investments and just double down on those efforts. And that has led to us being able to grow 100% over the last 12 months. So in retrospect, it worked very well. In terms of moving to a fully remote model, which we have, it was actually pretty seamless because we were already working partially remote. And so when COVID hit, a few months in, we shut down our office in Sacramento, and then we shut down our offices in Colombia as well. And we currently don't have any physical offices, and we're just 100% remote now.
Now, what you said about sales and marketing, investing in that, it's really interesting to me because I feel like it almost would seem counterintuitive, and obviously in your case it's not, but maybe some people at the time, like you said, you're looking at cutting costs, and that would maybe be one of the things people would look at and go, okay, well, look, let's scale back on that. So is that counterintuitive thinking where you're going against the kind of grain? It's obviously worked for you. What made you look at that and think, right, this is where we're going to invest?
It is counterintuitive. The common advice that you hear when, in times of economic disjointment like that is to immediately, cut your advertising spend and your marketing spend. And I think the reason that advice is given is it's a variable cost. It's a marginal cost that's easy to cut. You could quickly scale back your ad spend, in a matter of days. It's not difficult to do. But our point of view on it is, we're in the IT services industry, which is a, multi-hundreds of billions of dollars market cap globally. And we're doing, a very, 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 very small percentage of that in terms of our revenue. So we just looked at it as, how big is the market? How much of the market have we captured, and how much room do we have to grow? If the market shrinks 5%, it goes from 500 billion a year to 450 billion a year. Does that have any significant impact in terms of our market penetration? Obviously, the answer is no. There's plenty of market for us to go out there and capture. We just need to be more aggressive in order to do so, since people aren't going to be making buying decisions as quickly and as easily, which means we're going to have to invest in sales and marketing. We're going to have to build a bigger sales team. We're going to have to be more aggressive in terms of our outbound sales strategy, and we're going to have to be more aggressive in terms of our marketing spend. And the other benefit of taking that approach is that since everybody is cutting advertising spend, there's less competition out there to purchase ad space and to launch marketing initiatives. So it's cheaper to do in those times, which makes even more sense. What better time to invest in sales and marketing than when salespeople and when advertising dollars are cheaper and go further. Right now, the cost for marketing is at all-time highs because everything's rebounded and everybody's got a ton of money. And so, we've actually don't spend as much now as we were a year ago on marketing because the cost has gotten so expensive.
I love that. I don't know if you can see me smiling. I just love that it's counterintuitive. It's probably, some people say that it's a bad idea, and then you do it and then the results come, and things like maybe you wouldn't think about initially, like, it's cheaper, there's no competition. Like, it's just after the fact, it seems to make so much more sense. You're like, why would we not do that?
Well, I think there's so many things in life where that's the case, right? In hindsight, everything is crystal clear, but in the moment, everything is just confusing and everything's a shade of gray.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a bit more. Sorry, I don't know if you described too much in the beginning. What are your products? What are you selling?
So we provide about 75% of what we do is providing software developers to companies on an hourly contract basis. So let's say you're a 500-person company, you have a 20-person engineering team, and you want to scale up to 40 engineers for the next 2 years to try to build a product, or whatever your needs may be. You need to delve aside your engineering team, and either you don't want to hire full-time employees to do that, or you have a difficult time hiring full-time employees to do that. So then you'll come to FullStack and you'll hire our developers on a contract basis, and we'll provide anywhere from 1 to 40 developers for you for as long as you need to help you meet some of your technical engineering deadlines and goals. And we do that on both an onshore model, meaning we'll provide developers located in the United States, and then also nearshore, meaning we provide developers in Latin America. Our nearshore business is growing, very, very quickly relative to our US business. There's a strong demand for developers who speak English and are, highly technically competent, located in US time zones. And so that's really the kind of the need that we're addressing.
Is that a challenge then with people working in different time zones? You're used to staff maybe oversleeping their alarm because they have to get up in the morning. Do you have staff that have just slept through the night because they were meant to get up at 3 a.m. for a call or what?
So everyone that works at FullStack is located in US time zone. So we don't have team members located in Asia or Europe. Everybody's located in Central or South America or Canada. And so we don't have many issues in terms of time zones. When you get down to Brazil, we have about 50 people in Brazil, and their timing doesn't line up 1-for-1 with like the West Coast of the United States, but it's still, within like a 2 or 3 hour offset. And so it's generally pretty easy to get everyone's schedules to line up.
So was that by design then, choosing to work with people in these countries that are within these quite near time zones?
Yeah, we just had heard from clients from the very beginning that they really wanted to work with people in their time zone. We have a client right now, large technology company that was outsourcing to India for many years, and said that the consultancy they were using in India did a great job, but the communication was just too difficult with the time difference. And when they were awake, people in India were asleep and vice versa, and they just decided that it wasn't worth the trade-off. And so they're moving all of their development needs over to us, so that they could have folks located in Latin America who could work with them during the day, and kind of really integrate and be part of their team and work the same business hours.
It's amazing how the world has changed so much that you have a company where people are just working in different countries and it's completely seamless. I mean, 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago, just unthinkable, right?
It's pretty amazing. It's really, I enjoy it quite a bit. I always get a kick out of the idea that, like, you and I are talking right now, you're located on the other side of the world. We have 200 team members, located in, 20 different countries. And it really feels like we're all part of the same company. It feels like we're all on the same team. I personally don't see a big trade-off from having this remote business model. And, we have big plans for FullStack. We want to be at 1,000 people within the next 4 or 5 years. And it's going to be 100% remote. And, there are very few companies that have done that before. I mean, maybe a handful. And so we really are kind of exploring new territory here in terms of building and scaling businesses, in a fully remote model. But I'm excited about it. I really think it's the future work. We love it, and it's working super well for us. And it's certainly our plan for the future is to kind of continue to embrace this fully remote business model. Yeah, it's really pretty amazing how far things have come. And I think when people compare the two different work models of, in an office or fully remote, they have criticisms of the remote model, which are, fair and legitimate. People get tired of Zoom. They feel like they kind of don't have a connection as well, and they miss kind of that face-to-face interaction. Those are all, real issues that need to be addressed. But I also think people need to take into account the trade-offs of being in the office or of, doing in-person meetings. Prior to COVID and prior to this new way of working, it was common for people to spend large portions of their year on airplanes and in hotels and, and flying around the world, and spending a significant portion of their time just going, to try to be at a 1 hour or 2 hour meeting with someone. And it's just so ineffective and it's so wasteful. And so, yeah, there's a bit of a trade-off to having a Zoom meeting as opposed to an in-person meeting. But when you really look at the trade-off, to me, it's an easy call,
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. That was really common, right? Like, fly just even a few hours just to go for a 1 hour meeting that now with technology, you wouldn't even suggest it, right? You'd be like, right, well, we're having a meeting on Zoom at 2 o'clock. We'll see you there.
Oh, yeah. I have a friend of mine who works for a large enterprise company who would spend 4 days traveling to go to a 2-hour meeting, and not even with a client, just a meeting with their manager and some other teammates to do a brainstorming session or something. They'd spend Monday and half the day Tuesday getting to the office and on the other side of the country, and then be in the meeting for 3 hours and spend the rest of the week coming back. Just think about the cost of doing that and the lost productivity of doing that. It just seems insane. It's really the old school way of working, and a lot of people are really committed to that. And they have just, that's all they've known, and the idea of spending that much time traveling seems fine to them. But I think as the world moves more towards this remote model, they're going to have less, regardless of whether they want to do it or not. It's just going to become the norm, and businesses that try to operate that way just are going to get out competed because they're just not operating in an efficient manner.
Yeah, in terms of recruiting talent and things like that, the younger generation, if you don't give that option, right, then I think a lot of people are just going to be like, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. If you're trying to hire good people and you're telling them like, hey, you need to leave your family on a regular basis and spend a good portion of your year, in a hotel and on airplanes and in taxi cabs, I don't think a lot of people are going to be game for that. And also just the cost that comes along with it, right? Like, it's extremely expensive to do all that, to fly people around and put them in hotels and just pay their salary while they're not working. I just think eventually the markets can become more efficient. Companies that work remotely will be more efficient, and the companies that don't are going to be outcompeted because they're spending too much time and money on travel.
Yeah, for sure. So how's everything at this stage then? So you went fully remote kind of at the height of the pandemic, and then how have you transitioned now? What's the current office setting?
So we're currently still fully remote. We've surveyed our employees on 2 occasions now to try to get their input on, what they would prefer going into the future. And the overwhelming majority still prefer full-time remote. There is a significant minority who prefers mostly remote, but some time in the office, like 3 days remote, 2 days in the office. And then there's basically no one who wants to be full-time back in the office. I mean, that's like less than 1% of employees have indicated that that's their true wish. So, we have had feedback from team members that they feel lonely or disconnected being full-time remote. And so they would like to be able to go into an office a couple of days a week. And that's something that we've thought about, like, maybe, how do we handle this? Do we set up small offices and co-working spaces, like WeWork, so that people can come and meet face-to-face? Is there a way to kind of address that dynamic? And that's something we're still kind of working through and haven't made many decisions on yet. We may do that in the future. I don't envision us opening large offices again in any cities around the world. We're just too distributed at this point. We have people located in dozens of countries and hundreds of cities. And so the idea of opening regional offices just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, it's crazy because so you've obviously had a massive benefit. You've closed all of your offices, you said, right? And so
yeah.
Massive cost saving there in rent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that then how that affects other markets, right? So then the office rental market has now been heavily affected, which probably not many people saw that coming pre-pandemic. But how have you redirected those costs? Did you put those costs into sales and marketing? And then I guess a follow-on question is kind of what you touched upon. Is that something you're looking at doing, hiring a space where then people can use hot desks and things like this, or even have you thought about doing, maybe you have some sort of staff engagement activity, so if people want to see each other, it's not that they come in and work, that we all go out for dinner or we go out and bowling or whatnot?
Yeah, we've thought about it. Since we're so distributed, doing the regional offices or even like regional co-working spaces is difficult. It may make sense in certain cities like Sao Paulo, Brazil. We have a lot of people. We have a lot of people in Barranquilla, Colombia. And so we may reopen a small office there, so people could come in a couple of days per week. In the United States, we don't really have any concentration anymore, where it's pretty well distributed. So that may make less sense. I think we're going to try to approach it on a case-by-case basis. So we do our HR team does a lot of work with our team members to understand how they're doing at work, what is going well, and then what challenges they are having. And if in those meetings we hear from a team member that, hey, I feel lonely, I feel disconnected, I'm not fully, loving this full-time remote model, then I think on a case-by-case basis, we'll get people memberships to WeWorks and try to, address that, when it does come up, and try to, take some of the money we were spending on offices and reinvest it in those sorts of things. But there's other, I think there's other ways you could deal with that dynamic. And I would say in terms of remote work, I think that those are one of the challenges we're having is some employees do feel disconnected. They don't feel a sense of having, friends at work or a social network at work, which is really important. And so we think a lot about how to deal with that issue. And there's things that we do now, and then there's things that we want to try. So some of the things we do now are, we have a channel in Slack called Water Cooler, where every day we post a topic, favorite travel destination, favorite food, favorite music, things like just very kind of casual conversation, and everybody could hop into that channel and discuss these things. And it kind of creates that social dynamic at work, even though you're working remotely. And I think it's important to do that because a lot of employees, I think, or team members oftentimes will feel like, hey, I shouldn't be discussing non-work things while I'm at work. And, I'm never going to go and start posting this stuff proactively because I don't want to be judged. So, we created that channel to kind of give everyone permission, like, hey, we understand that there's a certain amount of social, interactions that take place at work. It's an important part of working at a employee focused company. And so we're going to encourage this, and we're going to have a place where we can all go and communicate at a social level, inside of Slack as part of our remote work environment. So that's one thing we're doing. Other things that we haven't done yet, but we're going to try are doing like virtual events, kind of like you mentioned around comedy. Airbnb has an offering now that we're going to try out where you could organize like cooking classes, so we'll say we have people in 20 different countries, and maybe we'll have cooking classes for Costa Rica, and then another one for Colombia, and then another one for Brazil, and then another one for Texas, and we'll all learn how to cook each other the local cuisine based on these different countries. That's one thing we're looking at. Doing sporting events together, so like watching soccer games together, watching the Olympics together, things like that over Zoom, so people could kind of build that camaraderie. Doing like video game competitions, things of that nature are kind of what we're envisioning for the future, and we're gonna try out.
That's awesome use of technology. And with the Olympics, that's the only way you can watch them. I don't know if you saw the news today that the Olympics won't be having any spectators.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot of people on Zoom watching it. Well, I was going to ask a follow-up question on that, something you touched upon. I was going to ask what's the challenges in terms of human resources, and from what you're saying about that kind of really case-by-case basis, having to find out individual needs. Did that mean that you've had to spend more time on HR? Have you had to hire more staff? Have you had to put in structures in place to make sure that you're having those one-on-one conversations that kind of before probably you would maybe see somebody in the workplace and you can, you see that they're down or whatnot, you can have a chat, or they'll just tell you, my kid's sick right now. We've lost all of those interactions. And I really like that, the use of Slack to create that space. Because again, these things that all happen at work, having a cup of coffee and you have a chat with your friend, or you send each other a message while you're sitting next to each other, or just that general camaraderie. And then we lose all of that when we go remote. So I think that's really impressive that you're using all those different techniques to bring people together. To go back to my question, there was, what have been the challenges with human resources?
Yeah, so we have invested more in human resources since we moved to the fully remote model, and it's somewhere that we plan to continue to invest. So right now, we do a 5-week check-in. Well, so when we hire someone, we're hiring 20 to 30 people per month. So their first week of the company, they meet with HR, and then they have a mentor that helps them kind of get up to speed at the company. And then after their 5th week, they have a follow-up meeting with HR just to make sure they kind of got onboarded correctly, everything is going well, they don't have any concerns. And if they do have concerns at that point, then we could address them for the team. In addition to that, every quarter, the beginning of every quarter, we do an anonymous employee survey where we ask them 10 questions, and then we measure our progress on those 10 questions over time. And we actually publish the results to our website so that our clients, the whole world, could see how we're doing in terms of employee satisfaction, and all of our employees could see it as well. So we really, as a management team, are really holding ourselves accountable for employee satisfaction. As a consultancy, hiring and retaining good talent that's the whole name of the game. We have to be good at that. We have to be an employee first organization if we really want to compete in the marketplace. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how can we make our remote employees happier and retain them longer. I do think a challenge with remote work is retention. The switching costs for employees and team members are very low when you're working remotely. You could spin up with a company pretty easily, work there for 6 months, and then take another better job offer, without much change in your life at all. Before, when we were all in the office, your options were pretty limited, right? Like there's 5 companies, 10 companies locally that I could work for. And if I leave this company, then I'm going to have to go to that company, and maybe my commute's going to be longer. Maybe, maybe their offices isn't nice. So there's all these different dynamics. When you're working remotely, it's just, okay, I'll turn off, this Slack channel, turn on that Slack channel, and I'm back in business as a team member, right? So it gives employees and team members a lot more leverage in that regard. And I think it creates a challenge and an opportunity for companies who want to learn how to retain team members and employees. But I think, we haven't got it 100% figured out. It's something that we're still trying to work through, but we spend a lot of time thinking about it, and we're going to keep kind of testing these different things to try to retain our best people,
That's such an interesting point. The choice of your jobs, really would be down to like where you live. And, I only want to drive so far to work, but now suddenly these options have become almost limitless, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, especially for what we do, right? Like the demand for software developers is at a fevered pitch. The market's never been like this. And, it's benefited us just in that we have a lot of clients who want to hire developers, but it's also created a challenge for us because hiring developers at scale is very difficult. And so, we're doing well. We're able to hire 20 to 30 per month, but it's certainly challenging. And then retaining them is the next, challenge you have to overcome. If you hire someone, but they leave in 6 months, well, that isn't really a win for the company. And so I think this is a challenge that we're going to continue to have, and that a lot of companies are going to have to kind of figure out how to deal with.
I'm sure you've measured this. So how is your staff retention now compared to pre-pandemic, or is it too soon to measure that?
So, if the Wall Street Journal has reported on this, others have reported on it. Industries across the board are having a challenge right now with high employee turnover. There's just so much demand for labor, and there's such a limited supply that, as I mentioned, employees kind of have, limitless options. And it's not just in the technology sector. I mean, it's across many different sectors of the economy. So I think it's a challenge for all types of employers. And it's a challenge for us. Our retention rate is not as good as it was before COVID. And I think that's simply because of the market dynamics. There's just so much opportunity, and wages are going up, and there's always a better, option out there if you're a software developer. And so we have seen our retention rate go down a bit, but we're also finding new ways to kind of deal with it. And, I'm hopeful that over the next 6 months, things will kind of level off a bit.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So what, have you developed any new ways? Have you started thinking outside of the box, or in terms of, you're looking for software developers, they have unlimited choices. They're younger as well, I would imagine, which is a different generation. What kind of packages do you put together that's different from previously to increase that retention?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't have a perfect answer for you. Unfortunately, I wish I did. First of all, if you have to pay well, I mean, there's just no getting around that. And so one of our advantages is we tend to pay, especially in Latin America, we tend to pay above market rates. And so that's kind of the first way that we attract employees. But in addition to that, we have very high Glassdoor rating. I think right now we're like 4.7 or 4.8 with about 60 reviews on Glassdoor. And that is something that we market a lot to employees. So when our recruiters are reaching out to developers to try to encourage them to come work with FullStack Labs, our two messages are: we offer above market compensation, and we have a 4.8 rating on Glassdoor. Those are really that's the sales pitch. And it's effective. I mean, people mention it oftentimes, like, hey, the reason I decided to take this interview, the reason I decided to take this job was because of how good your employee reviews are on Glassdoor. And I think the reason we have such good Glassdoor reviews is because we spend a lot of time focusing on, as I mentioned, doing quarterly surveys of employees and understanding what we're doing well and where we can improve. So for instance, a year ago, some of the feedback we started receiving from this quarterly employee survey was, hey, FullStack doesn't have a properly well-defined career path. And so we said, great, this is a great feedback from employees, great opportunity for us to address this issue. And we put together a very comprehensive and detailed career path for each different type of position within the company. So now everybody knows where they're at, what the next step up, the ladder is, and what they need to do to get there. And I think that's been a big win for us. Other things that we're doing in terms of, attracting and retaining is, this is something we just started, but we're doing a lot of employee-based marketing. So before, our marketing consisted mainly of trying to attract new clients. Now we've shifted a lot of our marketing time and budget to attracting new employees. So we're creating employee-focused marketing messages. We're doing interviews with current employees, asking them, what do you like about FullStack Labs? We're creating videos out of it, posting those videos on social media. We have gotten quotes from some of the employees, like what they enjoy about working here. And we create little like static images where it's the picture's face and then the person's face and then the quote saying, what I like about FullStack, and we advertise that on Instagram and things like that. So those are some of the kind of new initiatives that we're doing in terms of attracting remote employees.
And have you incorporated a corporate social responsibility policy? Do you use that at all? Because I know that can be, I don't know, no, maybe with the younger generation, it's not as important, but I know that can be a massive driver for staff.
Yeah, I don't think we don't have an official policy on that. That isn't something that we've really focused on from a marketing standpoint at this point. We have, our mission statement that is on our website, and we do communicate that in some of the first interactions we have with candidates, like what our mission statement is, what our values are, and what the culture is like at FullStack. So I think, that's kind of how we message that. For me, when I started FullStack, it was very important that we had a really strong, respectful, and positive work environment. And that's something that I've been focused on from the very beginning. And I've had bad experiences in the past of working at really negative and kind of aggressive work environments. And I really didn't like it. And one of the reasons I wanted to start my own company was so that I could really control and mold the company culture. And so those are our values, like high levels of respect, acting in a positive manner, not being pessimistic, and in treating people within the organization, with the respect that they deserve. And I think that's one of the reasons why we do so well on Glassdoor is we just don't tolerate abusive, we don't tolerate any sort of abusive behavior at work or negative, pessimistic, aggressive behavior. We just won't do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's good because if you set that culture from the beginning, and then it just is part of the company, right? And you shouldn't have to really weed it out or change culture, I guess is what I mean, which is much more difficult to change a company culture than it is to just create it from the beginning.
Absolutely. And the company culture comes from the top. I mean, that's been my experience. It's set by the leaders of the company, and then people emulate that behavior. So if the leaders are acting in a respectful, positive, proactive, energetic manner, then that's how the team's going to act. And if leadership is acting in an aggressive and pessimistic and accusatory manner, then that's how everybody else is going to react as well. And so it's really incumbent upon, that's job one of the leadership in organizations is to set and demonstrate the company's culture. And we have very detailed company policy on how to give and receive feedback. So we actually have like a 4-page document of, we take kind of the radical honesty approach. So having a respectful work environment doesn't mean that you don't give people feedback. It doesn't mean that you don't help people understand, their shortcomings and where they can improve. It just means that you do it in a really positive and respectful way. And so we have rules around, how to provide feedback. For instance, you don't provide feedback over Slack, and you don't provide feedback in writing. It's always done face-to-face over Zoom. It's just, there's too much room for misinterpretation and assuming ill intent when you send people written feedback. And when you do it face-to-face, it's much more likely to be received and understood. So that's just one example. There's several other things that we kind of require as part of that.
So as a tech company, unlike nearly all tech companies, it's quite easy, or easier, I would say, to move to remote working. What do you think other kind of industries can do? Is it a possibility at all for other kind of industries to be able to do that, to move to remote working?
Yeah, I mean, all companies are software companies now, right? I mean, that's I think I can't remember who coined that term, but I think it's right. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for companies in a variety of different industries to move to the remote model. Obviously, if you're doing construction, if you're doing, if you're in hospitality, some of these things require you to be on premise, and that's never going to change. But if you're looking at verticals, like healthcare, finance, things like that, a lot of people say, well, that, they can't work remotely. I don't think that's right. I think they can work remotely. There are companies out there that are, finance companies, banking companies that are startups that are taking that remote model. And I think they're going to outcompete the Bank of Americas of the world, who, are going to require everybody to be back in the office. And I think obviously in the healthcare space, we're seeing it as well, telehealth, those sorts of things. I've used those services. I think they're great. I don't think oftentimes there's no need to go see a doctor. Doing a virtual appointment is just fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how do you monitor and evaluate your staff's performance then remotely? Is there any technology that you've developed, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, we've tried a variety of different things, and there's things that I found that work, and then things that we're still kind of trying to work through. So it depends on the type of staff. For software developers, we have one approach, and then for operations and kind of non-technical roles, we have another. One trend though is daily updates. So for developers, they have a stand up every morning, and where they meet on Zoom, and they go over what they did yesterday, and then what their goal is to complete today. And then we do like 2-week sprints and all the typical agile development type things to make sure that people are getting their work done on time and turning it in on time. On the other side of the business, the non-technical side of the business, we use a similar model. So our recruiting and sales team, we have a daily stand-up where we all meet for 15 to 30 minutes and review all open issues, what we did yesterday and what we're going to achieve today. And then at the end of the day, we have a channel where everybody on these teams posts an update of like what they got done that day. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's just bullet points. Here's 5 bullet points of what I got done, that day. And we found that to be helpful. And then something I think we're going to try is like on a weekly or monthly basis, people are going to start posting. These are the big achievements I've accomplished over the last week or the last month. Not here's what I did, but like, here's what I've accomplished to move, the company forward and to achieve our goals. So things like that, I think are helpful. We also do, we bill our clients by the hour. So we have to track our time in terms of the hours spent, at least on the technical side of the business. So developers will enter, how many hours they worked on a client's project every day. And then we use a system called Toggle to manage those time entries and see how often people are working. That also gives us the ability to pay overtime. So one thing that's kind of different about us relative to other consultancies is we pay developers overtime when they work, extra hours. And that's something that they really like. And that's something a lot of other companies don't do. But in order to do that, we do have to have, some time tracking in place to know when people are working overtime. So anyways, the time tracking is kind of another way we try to manage what's getting done. At a high level, how we approach management though is we give people a lot of latitude and a lot of room, and we don't micromanage them. And if they're doing well and they're achieving their goals, that's our approach, is hands off. We're here to help. We're here to remove roadblocks for you if you need if you need our help in doing so. Otherwise, we're going to treat you like an adult, like a professional, and we're going to give you the space you need to do your job. if people are missing that, or if people aren't achieving their goals, if the client isn't happy with them, if we're encountering problems with our work product, then we will tighten up our management and we will start monitoring them more closely to make sure that they are working. 99% of the time this isn't an issue, but 1% of the time we do have remote employees who, we have later found out were working 2 jobs at the same time, who would just be not available for large portions of the day, who weren't, actually doing the work. And I think that's always a risk. I mean, we have to be honest about that. There is a very low percentage of people who are going to try to game the system, and companies have to, guard against that. There has to be accountability. People have to get the job done. And so, when we start to sense that maybe that's happening, then we tighten up and we really, on a day-to-day basis, are looking at like, what are you doing? What are you getting done? And then if there is an improvement, then we have to part ways.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that, maybe because I'm an honest person, but I hadn't thought about the possibility that if you're working remotely, you could just you could potentially take on 2 jobs and be making double the salary. But I guess, and you've probably experienced it, it's pretty hard to do 2 jobs well, right?
Yeah, it's not possible, and so we try to be very clear now so that there's no, confusion on that point, but we tell people like, look, it's, we shouldn't have to say this, but you can't work 2 jobs at the same time. Sorry. And, it's only happened a couple of times, so I don't want to make it's a huge problem, but it has happened a couple of times over the few hundred people that we've hired.
It's not, I mean, even I've signed contracts before where it said like you can't take another job, and that was working in an office, so it's not completely unusual to tell someone you can't have another job,
Yeah. It's, if you're working part-time or something, that's one thing, but yeah, if you're working full-time at a company, you need to be 100% committed and focused on that job and not trying to spread yourself across multiple jobs. Yeah. There's someone on Twitter right now, an anonymous developer on Twitter, who's bragging about working 5 to 6 jobs at the same time. And their whole approach is to just, basically they will take a job and then they'll try to write it out for 3 months until they're fired. And they're not working. They're just interviewing and taking additional jobs during that 3 months and then rolling from job to job to job as they're fired from one and going to another. And, and they've apparently made $1.6 million already this year because they have 6 incomes coming in. And I mean, that's just straight up like criminal behavior, but that's kind of the example.
Wow. There's always someone that's unashamedly going to game the system, right?
Yeah.
Is that actually illegal, or is it's just like completely unethical?
I mean, it just depends on which jurisdiction you're in and what your contract says, but it's certainly unethical.
Yeah, well, for sure.
And I don't think it's illegal and like you're going to go to jail for it, but it's, you're breaching your contract with the company. My guess would be that you probably have civil exposure there.
So you may have to pay, maybe have to pay a lot of that money back.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's watching and has a similar setup to you in terms of their company, what advice would you give to them about changing to a hybrid workplace or changing to a 100% remote workplace? You've covered quite a lot and you've probably given a lot of good advice already, but do you have any other pieces of advice that you could give?
I think you just have to embrace it and understand that this is the future of work and not try to hold on to this past model of working in offices. For a company like us that's fully remote, I'm glad to see my competitors requiring people to go back in the office because that's just an opportunity for me to go and hire their employees. So, I think that, whenever I hear of a company, insisting on it, I was like, great, that's what I need. That makes me more competitive in the market. And so I'm happy to hear that that's what they're doing. But, if I were to give advice to those companies, it would be, look, you need to just understand that this is the future of work. You're not going to be able to compete if you're only hiring within a 20-mile radius of your office, for many industries. That time is come and gone. And so better to spend your time figuring out how you're going to be a successful remote company than trying to figure out how you're going to convince people to commute an hour and a half a day and sit in the office. I just think those days are gone.
Yeah, for sure. So final question. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has completely reshaped the work environment, as we've talked about. As a CEO and a company leader, how can you prepare for another potential black swan event like this?
That's a hard question to answer, right? I mean, if you don't know the answer to that, then running a business would be much easier. I think I don't know if I have a good answer for that question. How do you prepare for the next COVID crisis? I don't know. I think you just have to be quick to react, and you have to kind of, like I said, like take a counterintuitive approach oftentimes and make decisions for yourself. Don't believe everything you read in the media. Don't believe, the advice you read on business blogs. Oftentimes I think the best advice is counterintuitive, and it's not the advice that you're going to find in mass media.
And invest in sales and marketing.
Yeah, invest in sales and marketing when that time does come.
Thank you so much. It's been awesome chatting to you all the way in Austin, Texas. I'm looking forward to coming back there soon. Once this pandemic's over, we'll be going back to visit Texas and get some barbecue and do some honky tonk dancing as well. I'm excited for that.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation.